Joining us is one of the leading scholars in securities law here in the United States, and that's John Coffey of Columbia University. So, Professor, Sheila just explained to us what Bloomberg has learned in terms of what these deals that are being probed actually looked like. What does that sound like to you? Is this a Goldman Sachs-like scenario or something different?
Well, what we're learning is that Goldman Sachs was in no way unique. Most of the major underwriters of CDOs were constructing synthetic CDOs that they bet against or that their preferred clients were helped to bet against. The feature that you just pointed out about Morgan Stanley's deal is a particularly toxic quirk, but it was disclosed. Deep in the prospectus on page 61, it's explained. And that gives them greater protection against a 10b-5 sort of claim. Nonetheless, I think the industry as a whole is looking very exposed, very vulnerable, and my own guess is that they're going to increasingly see the merit of a global settlement rather than having individual firms picked out for possible prosecution.
So you believe Goldman Sachs doesn't have perhaps the defense that you're pointing out Morgan Stanley may have in terms of the disclosure that was given?
Yes, there was disclosure of this very toxic quirk. It's possible that some institutional investors are not as sophisticated as they think they are and miss this, because your story also points out that the various monoline insurers looked at this and said no rational person would buy it with this feature in it.
So do you expect any indictments out of not just this claim, but all of the probes we've been hearing about this week? It's seemingly come to light, although I will say in anonymously sourced articles citing probes that began back in 2009, but we are seeing a wide net being cast by the SEC and perhaps other agencies as well.
I think there is more than one U.S. Attorney's Office conducting investigations. However, you should recognize that the U.S. government, as a matter of policy, has not indicted a publicly held corporation since the Arthur Andersen fiasco back in 2002, where the indictment of that accounting firm produced its relatively quick death, and losses were borne by really very innocent secretaries, stock boys, file clerks as the partners moved on. The government's preferred policy these days has been to negotiate a deferred prosecution agreement. We haven't heard them talk about that yet, but I don't think there is any financial services firm that is prepared to accept the risk of a criminal trial if there is a possibility of a negotiated resolution through either a civil settlement or even a deferred prosecution agreement.
Does that view of yours also include the recent expected actions from the New York Attorney General Andrew Cuomo as he probes what disclosure was made to ratings agencies here? Will anything come from that?
Certainly something could come from that. The problem in focusing on the crime of deceiving a rating agency is the rating agencies look to most as willing co-conspirators with the investment banks. It's hard to say that you defrauded someone who looked like they were sitting there ready to acquiesce in anything their clients wanted. Nonetheless, there is one major precedent for all this. Back in the global settlement reached with the securities analysts and the broker-dealer industry in 2002, both the then New York Attorney General Eliot Spitzer, the SEC, the U.S. Attorney, and all the state attorney generals joined in one joint global settlement, and that resolved investigations that could have gone on literally for a decade.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
John Coffey from Columbia University giving us some perspective there, saying maybe there's some safety in numbers.